It's time to move on if you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan, because the team has to. Free agency is right around the bend. What does it look like today on Locked On Chiefs?
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back in, everybody. This is the offseason of your Kansas City Chiefs as they look to recover from this Super Bowl loss. There's a lot, and I mean a lot to go on. We're going to take the first step in just taking a look at the roster today. What is the free agency list? What needs to happen? We will finish up with what are the first moves we feel they should go after that, in terms of players, that is. That'll be coming up later in the show. What does the cap look like right now as we sit here and speak? Chris is going to run us down and give us all the financial information. You can find more of that over at his site, KC Chiefs Corner, so make sure you go check that out. And we will start with who's on the Chiefs list, who should be a priority. I have more on that coming here on NFL 33 this weekend and next week, so check that out. This is Chris Clark. You know him, KC Chiefs Corner. I'm Ryan Tracy, NFL 33, RGR Football, and RogueAPC.com, where we do all the athleticism and all the production metrics you could ever need for this draft cycle, so don't miss that. That's coming up as well. Check out another Locked On show for your next listen. Thanks for making us your first. You locos are why we do this, and we appreciate you. You can get on the text line with the locos at 816-357-8781. So here we are. Whatever's happened. I don't feel the need to dwell on the game anymore unless you want to. So my thought immediately turns to, they got a lot of work to do. So who's on the Chiefs list? It is a long, long list of current free agents. I want to run them down and see what stands out to you. I'm going to go in reverse age order, not by who's most likely or who's the biggest need. We're going to get to that coming up here later in the show, folks. So in reverse age order, at the oldest is James Winchester, 36 years old. Mike Pennell under that at 34. Carson Wentz and DeAndre Hopkins, 33 each. DJ Humphries, 32. Jody Fortson is still on the list. We know they're not going to bring him back. Kareem is hitting 30, as is Samaje Perine, two 30-year-old running backs. I don't know if they can bring them both back, but we're going to find out. Then we get into the 29s. That's Juju Smith-Schuster, Justin Watson, and Derek Nottie. Surprisingly, at 28, and maybe this caught people by surprise, it caught me a little bit off guard as well, Mike Caliendo is already 28 years old. I did not realize that. I thought it was at most 26, but Malik Herring, Marquise Brown, obviously, Charles Omenihu, and Justin Reed, all 28 years old. I think that's right where you're getting into the question mark range, right? Underneath that, Nazeeh Johnson is coming in at 27 years old. He was an older prospect to begin with, as is Keith Taylor, another secondary person or position in the 27 range. McCole, Turk Wharton, who I think is really, we're going to have to dedicate some time talking to him. Joshua Uche, those are the 27-year-olds. Then Spencer Schrader, I don't think there's any need for another kicker at this point unless there's some serious contention about what you're going to do with Bucker. Then the meat and potatoes here. Trey Smith, Jack Cochran, Peyton Hendershot, Marlon Tuipulotu are all 26. And then Baylor Cupp, Matt Araiza, and Nick Bolton are 25s. That is the Chiefs list right now. And that includes unfettered every type of free agent. Who stands out to you in that list?
So really quick, it looks like they've already re-signed Baylor Cupp, so he should be here for 2025.
I like that one.
ERFA, sorry. Matt Araiza, I expect he's going to be back. I'm not going to be shocked if they bring Spencer Schrader back. He is an ERFA. It would be cheap. They could bring in an extra kicker. I think that Butker has a potential to need surgery this offseason, so it would make sense to potentially have somebody just here. So that wouldn't shock me.
Somewhere also, didn't he? So that he wouldn't even be an option.
I'm not sure. I would imagine probably so, but I expect Caliendo back because he's another ERFA or ERFA. I know people will be frustrated by that, but I do think he'll be back. So those are where I look, the first ones. Okay. I also expect Nazeeh Johnson's going to be back. He's a restricted free agent. Keith Taylor could be back as a restricted free agent. Cochran and Hendershot, I also believe, will be back as restricted free agents. That gets us to unrestricted free agents, and there is a huge list that's, yeah.
and it's all over the place. The nice thing, and maybe folks
I expect
don't
Winchester
know,
back. I'll just do the easy one.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, you haven't had another long snapper since Patrick came to this team, right? So I think that makes sense.
And he's still doing well, at least from what I've seen. I mean, yeah, it's not perfect every time, but nobody is perfect every time. So I think for what he's getting paid, which is $1.4 million, I think you can bring him back and be happy with it. And it's not going to be a guaranteed contract. So worst case scenario, you find a snapper in the draft, and I guess Winchester wouldn't be here next year. But the reality is they made him a captain for a reason. They made him a special teams captain for a reason. I don't think that's just to let him go this offseason, but we'll see. I expect Carson Wentz back because he didn't really get any playing time, and when he did, he didn't look great. So it would not shock me to have him back. Then you get into the interesting ones. To me, Samaje Perine would make sense, mainly because I think they need a third down type back, and unless you're going to go out and draft one, I think you need somebody that can at least step in and back up Pacheco. So that would make sense to me. You can make an argument for lots of different guys on this list, but the one that sticks out to me that I would probably want back the most that necessarily hasn't been achieved for a long time is Marquise Brown. That's one that I would like back because I think you can give him something that incentive based, and he is going to want to come here and really have a chance. Because the reality is he didn't do much this season. I don't know that there's going to be great value for him out there. If there is, then that's a different story. But to me, I think that he would want to chase and have another chance at chasing a ring with Patrick in 2025.
Yeah. And I think he will probably be on my list of first moves to make. We're going to cover that later in the show, folks. I think as we look at this list, it is almost overwhelming at how big it is and how many names that we're talking about as being unrestricted free agents in particular that have played key roles in the last couple of seasons. That's something that I think is very hard to overcome, especially when you talk about Charles Omenihu, who, despite the injury, has been, I think, a key stabilizing force next to Chris Jones. You have to replace that role, if not that man, if you don't bring back Charles Omenihu. So that's something that we'll have to look at. And there are a number of players here that are right in the middle that hey, 26, 27, you've done some good things. You haven't been able to make a huge impact. Like, what are the criteria? That's going to be hard to do. We're going to have to go through that over the next week or two.
Yeah, and there's one that's extremely young. I mean, there's a couple guys on here that are extremely young that come from a draft class 4 years ago, right after the Chiefs lost their last Super Bowl. There's two guys on this list that are going to get a ton of talk, and there's a lot to figure out. I will say this: when you look at the way that this roster is built and how it's been built, I would expect that what you're going to see in the next couple of weeks is that Kansas City isn't going to be making a lot of signings. Maybe I'm wrong, but I expect that they're probably not going to be making a lot of signings and bringing their guys back, and they're going to try to go younger at a lot of positions and bring back the higher quality players, because the reality is you can't bring back all the small ones that you have right now. And I guess I'm looking at, a guy like Justin Watson, who has a role on this team, but it's pretty limited. And I don't think you want to spend the money there until you see whether or not he's going to have a market elsewhere.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And to make those guys either eligible to return or have the room for them, you got to have the cap space. That's coming up next. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means it's time to hire. You need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it free and easy to post for free on your profile with your network and get qualified candidates that you're looking for all in one place. So post your job. The new feature can even help you write job descriptions and then quickly get in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's the pro tip: add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find the high quality hires right away. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Money makes the world go round. It certainly does in the NFL. If you want more about that, check out KC Chiefs Corner, where you can see Chris's work every day, all the time on his format. Better writer than me, that's for sure. But we have a great staff over at NFL 33, and we're covering the league around and outside of Chiefs Kingdom, so you can get a bit of a different perspective and know what might be available. There's going to be some surprise cuts, some things that will play into these equations that we're talking about. It all comes down to having the cap space and having the ability to make signings when you feel it's right. So how bad is it? Should I cringe?
Yes. So we talked a couple days ago, it was $11 million. They have $113,000 right now. It's not quite down to the, what was it, $429 they had a couple years ago. But they're down to less than $1 million, less than 500,000, and that's going to be a significant issue. Right now, the total cap liabilities is $275,531,386. I don't know that I'm sure the team has a better idea of exactly what the cap is going to be for 2025. That's what Over the Cap is thinking it's going to be. I don't think it's been actually set yet, and we will get that number shortly. But the reality is they don't have any cap space, and that's not shocking though. Like, so the other reason that I bring this up is because when I looked at this the other day, when we talked about it right after the Super Bowl, they had like 11 million in cap space, but they only had 38 players on their roster. Right now, they have 50 players on their roster and 0 cap space. So the reality is they basically made all the moves that they can until they free up some more cap space. And in the offseason, it's only the top 51 that count. And right now they have 50 on their roster. So they quite literally can't add anybody unless they make a reorg of some sort. So I would imagine that they're done until they figure out what they're going to do with Patrick's number, or they get an answer from Travis Kelce, or they figure out what they're going to do with Chris Jones. There's lots of different ways to make money on this cap with what they have right now.
And you have fairly fresh deal on Chris Jones, which means you have a little bit more room to maneuver. I haven't looked at the specifics of it, but do you think that a restructure there or some kind of a extension or something is in the works? Is that a good place to go?
Here's the problem. Chris Jones is in his 30s. So anything you do is potentially going to make problems down the line. He's 31 right now. He is still a fantastic player. He's got 4 years left on his deal. He is guaranteed almost $29 million this year. So, but he doesn't have any. I guess he has a roster bonus next year of $16 million, but he doesn't have any other guaranteed money after that. So if you make a move and you adjust his contract, you're just creating additional voids and problems down the line. Now, he does have a bonus proration of $6 million a year. So I'm not, and I want to be clear, I'm not saying that they do this, but say that they would decide that they want to cut him after 2026. Right now, he's going to cost you $12 million in dead cap because he has bonus proration. You spread out his cap number this year of $35 million, basically, and then that's going to go up. Is it going to be 15, 17? I mean, it depends on what they make that cap number be. But we do know that they're going to be making a move with Patrick's number. We just don't know what it's going to be and how much. And there's several other players that they could do. It's not just Chris Jones.
Yeah, and that's what I'm looking at here. Chris Jones, obviously the second biggest contract or cap number this coming season behind Patrick Mahomes. Then Juwan Taylor, then Joe Thuney. Two players that we've talked about, possibly both being made moves on. I think Taylor might be something that you might be able to restructure because you can't. What's the dead cap? It's ridiculous on him, isn't it?
Yeah, Taylor currently has a $20 million guarantee for this season. If you cut him, it would be $34 million. So they could get rid of him, but it'd cost them more than he is costing them right now. Now they also could do a June 1st on him if they wanted to do that. But I think the reality of what you're looking at is you're only going to do that if you think you're going to be able to sign maybe Trey Smith long term, because otherwise, you're basically going to be going into next season without a starting right tackle or a starting left tackle. as of right now. Now, obviously, that can change in free agency. That can change in the draft. There's lots of different ways you can do it and go about it, but that's a problem.
Yeah, I agree. So managing the cap is the biggest thing here, and they have to, take from their own piggy bank some way or another. In the coming weeks, we'll talk about cash versus cap and what they might have to do to change the way they do deals. But just looking at the age groups here, Taylor's 28. He's the youngest of this core group, right?
Yeah, but who's the best player?
No, I understand that, and I think that's debatable at this point. So I don't think you can move on from him, certainly, but he's also one of the younger ones. Creed obviously is a year younger. Mike Dan, I think, is right about that. Harrison Butker hits 30 this year. So does Drew Tranquil. Those are two that caught me by surprise as well. And so the longer you get into the contracts, the more impact it has in the dead money until you get to the last season or two. So do you think extensions are the way to approach some of these guys?
Well, I will say with Butker, I'm not going to care about him being 30. As long as, and they know way more about his knee than we do. Right. I still think that they're going to have some kind of surgery, and that's a concern. But as long as they think he's going to be healthy long term, he can play until he's almost 40 probably. He's not going to have the leg at 40 that he has right now, but he's going to still be strong enough to hit 55 yarders for the next 6, 7, 8 years probably would be my guess. Okay. So I'm not worried about Butker. When you look at a guy like Joe Thuney, who they voted on as being the team MVP, I think that they're going to have some kind of extension done with him. What are they going to pay him? That's the big question. Because the reality is that if you go and pay Thuney and you pay him like he probably deserves to be paid, you can kiss any chance of having Trey Smith goodbye. And maybe that's okay with them. Maybe that's their plan at this point. But that's really going to be the big question is what are you going to do? Because you probably can't keep both of those guys. And if you want to keep Trey Smith, I don't think you can keep Joe Thuney. And I just can't imagine that they're going to have the guy that they voted as their MVP be gone because of the cost. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. They can't carry him at $26 million. I cannot see that happening. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, when I play around with it, there are ways to get this done, especially the Mahomes deal. We know it's built this way in order to recoup that money.
And there's also another big one that we don't know an answer to, and it's Travis Kelce. Yeah. I mean, we will know before free agency starts if Travis Kelce is going to play again or not. If he is, then you have another issue. But if he doesn't play and he decides he's retiring, he is going to free up about $16 million, $17 million, somewhere in there. So, and I'm not, and to be clear, I'm not saying I want him to retire, but the reality is if he does retire, the only thing that hits the cap for the Chiefs at that point, as long as he retires before the new league year, is his signing bonus proration, which is about 2.5. So it would free up $17 million. That gives you enough space to be, players in free agency of some sort. And that doesn't even touch Patrick's number of 66, which I can't imagine that they want that to even be in the 50s when the season starts or when the offseason really kicks off. So I would imagine that they're going to get another 15, 16, maybe even 20 or $30 million from Patrick.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's a specific way to go about that this year that differs from last. We're going to talk about that probably tomorrow or Monday, specific to Patrick Mahomes and how to go around that because he's maybe the linchpin. But there are many, many players that have to make decisions right now. What are the first batch of moves? Those are coming up next. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place to get into it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place your live bets throughout the game, start to finish. Even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can get there. You can stay in the action. And if you want to go looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into same-game parlay. You got to love that because it's a new aspect. You can just roll it into it. If you're backing your team for a late-game rally or picking up a player who just hit a three and you think he's getting really, really hot, you can do that in the app, and it makes it super easy. Right now, our new FanDuel customers are getting $150 in bonus bets if you first get a $5 bet that wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets right now. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL and the NBA. Okay. Folks, make sure that you sub to this channel because we are going to go through every scenario we can possibly come up with this offseason. This is just day one, and it's going to get hairy. Every deal that is made or is not made will have an effect on every other one. So make sure that you're subbed because we're here for you 5 days a week, all year long, no matter what, and we appreciate you.
It's going to make your brain blow, but I'm going to enjoy it. So
right. And it drives me nuts, wears me out to tell you the truth. So I'm just going to give you layups. I'm not ready. So you tell me, what's the first thing that they should do?
It's so tough. I wish I had you say this is a layup. It's not, because the reality is the first domino that needs to fall is probably Travis Kelce, and they don't have any control over it. Are there things that they can do? Yeah, they can figure out. And I'm betting what the team is doing right now. What I would be doing if I was the team is I would be looking at your salary cap and saying, okay, if Travis retires, this is what we can do. If Travis doesn't retire, this is what we can do. And make scenarios and try to figure out, well, I mean, you're going to have more than just two scenarios, but I mean, those are going to be the starting points for a lot of what you're going to do in free agency and in re-signing your own guys and bringing in free agents. So to me, I think if you figure that Travis is going to play, then you have to probably figure out a way to get $20 to $30 million in cap space free. And how do you do that? Well, I mean, Joe Thuney is at 27. I don't think you want him playing at 27. So to me, I think that's probably one of the first moves that you're going to consider making. And if you can get him for a 2-3 year contract and get it to where his cap number drops, even, I don't know, 15 million, that opens up a lot of space that you can do a lot of things with. The real question is, and this is, we talk about 2025 like it's everything that matters. It's not. The problem is you have to figure out how are all these pieces going to fit together in not only 2025, but 2026 and 2027. And how does it all fit together? Because you start looking at like a guy like Creed Humphrey, who has an $11 million cap hit almost this year in 2025. Next year, his cap hit goes to 18.1 and then 21.6. Yeah. So the reality is like you can lower the cap number for this year and that'd be great. But are you going to be able to get it to where it's going to work and make sense for you in 26 and 27 and 28? And because the reality is this team is probably trying to build out their cap and have a good idea as to what they want to do as long as Patrick is under contract through 2031 right now. So I think that you start with Thuney. I think that if Kelce can free up money, because the other thing with Kelce is maybe he comes back and says, I'm not retiring. I want to play 2 or 3 more years. Well, then you consider doing an extension with him and lowering his cap number.
Yep. Absolutely.
So I think there's lots of different ways you can go about it and do it. It's just going to be a matter of, I think Kelce's probably one of the first dominoes that needs to fall. He's got to have that decision. He's got to make that. And unfortunately, the team is going to be waiting for that.
I agree. And taking it outside of that scenario, things that they can control, I do like, looking at Joe as well. I think that decision might take a longer time to get to. I think he might be weighing whether he wants to return for certain as well, given 33 years old. So for me, I look at what can you do right this minute so that you're not lingering past the beginning of free agency. You're not putting a ton of pressure and have no room to maneuver while Travis and maybe Joe are deciding. So I'm looking at Chris Jones and just restructuring what you currently have with him. Looks like you can get just over 20 million back right now to at least give yourself that breathing room initially, knowing that you have the piggy bank that is Patrick Mahomes that we'll talk about later.
Well, and you can do that. Again, I think the problem that you get into there is how much do you want to actually do? I mean, Here's the problem also with Patrick and Chris Jones and anybody else that you're talking about restructuring is you can only do it once in a season. So if you're going to do it, you have to make sure you're going to do whatever the max is that you know you want to do. And I don't mind doing it with Jones because I think he could play for another 2 or 3 years, and that is going to be something that I'd be okay with. But you're still going to basically make his cap hit in, if you add $20 million, you're going to add maybe, 14, 15 million to his cap hit that you'd lose when if he retired or you cut him in 2 years. Again, not saying that you want to do that, but that's got to be part of the thought process is how much are we kicking the can down the road. So for a guy that is 31 going on 32, I think that that's something you have to take into account a little bit more than you have to worry about a guy like Patrick Mahomes, who's 29 and likely to play for, I would imagine another decade at least.
Yeah, that's kind of my general feeling as well. Those moves and how they go about it, sometimes those get pretty convoluted. And as you said, you're parking money later in a contract that you don't really have a way out of. There are some other twists and turns, techniques, we'll call them. Howie's been very good at using them. And if you're going to say Brett Veach is one of the best in this league, who's better? Well, Howie Roseman is the guy you got to look at. I'll have a piece on NFL 33 about how they got to this point because they've taken some chances. And I think that's where you're thinking as well, right?
Yeah, and I don't know that I would Howie Roseman's fantastic. But the question is, and it won him the Super Bowl this year.
Yep.
He did an amazing job at winning the Super Bowl in 2024. Is he going to be able to continue to compete for Super Bowls for the next 5 years? I don't know because they've used a lot of void years. Jalen Hurts' contract is full of void years. They use it on all their big players, and that is going to catch up to you. Are you going to be able to continue to do? I mean, the problem with using void years is if you don't continuously reuse void years, it catches up to you. And if you don't draft well, you can't keep the young talent coming in enough to keep it working. And I think that's going to be a big problem with New Orleans in the coming years. New Orleans is way worse than Philly is, but there's a big question as to how long is that sustainable. Right now, it's okay for New Orleans because they're able to make it work, but they continuously are over the salary cap. Now, to be clear, the Eagles have $18 million in cap space in 2025 right now, and they have 49 people on their roster, so that's not horrible. But if you go look at like the New Orleans Saints, they're $54 million over the cap.
Yeah, and that's crazy. And the techniques to use that are convoluted and honestly confusing at some. So maybe tomorrow we'll go through what those void years actually do and how they put stress on that system that is any team's cap. And then we'll revisit as we go through next week as well. So make sure that you like and you sub and you're part of the channel here. So we're going to continue to go through. You can get more information in KC Chiefs Corner and on NFL 33, of course. We're very excited about it because as tough as that loss was to watch in the Super Bowl, knowing that they're right behind the corner and able to get back on track, this is where team building becomes the most important phase of the offseason. We're going to give you all the coverage that you're going to need for it. Make sure that you are with us the whole way, and we will start right back in tomorrow. Thanks for listening today, and we'll talk to you then.